Imagine a city reinventing itself, shedding mindsets, reversing trends, and creating new approaches toward creativity and collaboration. Building new social networks, physical spaces, and technical platforms to reposition its role in an unfolding future. That would be remarkable. Mapping that future is already underway at a place called Cortex, located in the heart of the city of St. Louis. But to think of Cortex simply as a place misses the point, because it's every bit as much a concept. To create spaces where people and ideas collide serendipitously within a community dedicated to innovation.
We welcome you to Next Up, Donnybrook Next Up, and that, of course, the great Patrick Murphy and what was happening at Cortex before the pandemic. We are so happy to welcome Sam Fiorello. He is the president and CEO of Cortex Innovation Community. Sam, thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure, really.
So a little bit of that introduction was mapping out where Cortex was before the pandemic. If you could share with our 9 PBS viewers, where were you exactly when the pandemic hit, and where are you today?
Yeah, so I started the position in March of 2020, just as things were shutting down hard. In the years before that, there was tremendous momentum. We had 90-some% occupancy. We would have regularly 500-600 people coming on Thursdays to Venture Cafe events. We would host delegations from around the world that wanted to read about or learn about the great things at Cortex. And it all came to a screeching halt. The biggest headaches pre-me were people needed to find parking. Is there enough parking? That hasn't been an issue for the last couple of years.
So where are we today?
Well, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. The 2 years during the pandemic where things were shut down were really tough for Cortex. Tough programmatically because we're about convening, right? We bring people together, we have events, we share ideas, we have hackathons, and that didn't happen. And also financially a big hit. Our revenue sources like rental income on our month-to-month real estate, parking revenues, and so forth really were a hit. We're now coming, I see the light at the end of the tunnel. There are more and more cars in the lot. I see energy in the buildings. We had an event, our first true event at a Venture Cafe last Thursday night was an event, it was a cybersecurity job fair and then a series of panels on cyber issues, and there were close to 500 people there. So it was exciting and wonderful, and I see the light at the end of the tunnel.
So Sam, let me get this straight. You want us to believe that the problems of the last year were because of the pandemic and not because of you taking charge. Is that what you're saying? Well, I actually, people should know you ran the Danforth Plant Science Center for how many years?
Well, I was fortunate to be there at the very beginning of the conversations when Dr. Danforth had this audacious idea to put a stake in the ground and say we should be the best place in the world for discovery for food and plants and commerce, and that was in February of 1997. And
we could agree that Dr. Danforth really is really on the Mount Rushmore of civic leaders in St. Louis. And yeah. It must have been something for you to work for him.
It was the honor of my career. And Dr. Danforth was a visionary. He brought people together around a cause, and he always was focused on the best thing for the cause, never himself. So it was incredible.
Now, speaking of, I'm sorry, can I say what?
Sure.
Speaking of focus, one of the things I've heard said is that's a challenge for the Cortex, aside from the pandemic, which, you know, obviously is huge, is staying focused in the way that the Plant Science Center did, where the Plant Science Center was about just what you described and has stayed very much on that mission. With Cortex, it's had generations of I think there's a new plan now, and you've had generations of, it's been 20 years now, right, since it started?
This is its 20th anniversary,
and,
that's right.
And so it's had a lot of different kind of visions. How do you see the challenge of having it be focused?
Yeah, so the first thing is, with the Danforth Plant Science Center, hard focused on food and ag, and that was the lane, and that's terrific. But there's a different scale at Cortex, right? Cortex has 6,000 employees in the district, 425 companies, 200 acres, millions of square feet. And the strategic plan that we just unveiled a couple of weeks ago, from top to bottom, the theme is focus, right? Because if you can't focus on a handful of things, fact, I have a sheet I put together for the Cortex team and the board and others. There are 10 questions to ask before you make any decisions to get into something. Is this clearly within mission? Are we ideally suited to do this? Who else is doing it? And so what we have done is we still have the life science pillar as a focus, right? And I'm excited about that because we can continue to leverage Washington University, BJC, St. Louis University medical schools. They're centers of discovery second to none. The neuroscience building that Washington University Medical School is putting together is going to be 650,000 square feet. It will be the largest concentration of neuroscience activity in the world. We should be able to, that's unique to us, we should be able to leverage that for success. We also are trying to leverage the investment by the federal government with the NGA. Several billion-dollar investment on location science or geospatial. We, Cortex, we, St. Louis region, should and must be able to leverage that investment. We're uniquely suited to say, you can't get that in Nashville or in Indy. So it's incumbent on us to plan around how do we leverage. So at Cortex, one of the things we're doing, because we have other partners in different lanes, T-Rex is terrific at the early stage work. Cortex is going to work with developers to build work-from-home proof a secure space that companies need to access some of the work that comes from the NGA. Companies like Airbus USA and Boeing and General Dynamics and Booz Allen Hamilton. And we've already been talking to those large employers, and they say, if that kind of infrastructure is available, we'll move there. We'll move people from Denver and DC and other places there. We need that space. What they also say is, but we need to be able to hire the talent to fill the slots we need. And if you can't fill that bucket, it doesn't matter if you have the most wonderful lab and SCIF and secure space in the world.
That leads to our next line of questioning for you, Sam. When you talk about innovation, when you talk about really moving the ball forward, you have to have the workforce. These, as we all know, in terms of every sector, the workforce has been affected by the pandemic. What do you do to ensure that?
Yeah. So as a region that aspires to be a player in the tech economy, right? You think of it as Maslow's higher order needs. Ability to have talent is fundamental. And if you can't get it, when I talk to CEOs about prospectively moving their companies or establishing a presence in our region, in Cortex, I say, what are the needs you have to be met? And always they say, I need the talent to run my business, grow my business. And the second thing they say is, we have made some pledges on having a more diverse workforce. Today, most of these tech jobs are white and they're men, and we think we have made proclamations and we're serious about having a more diverse workforce. Why? Because it's right, and B, because there is tremendous amounts of data that shows the more diverse a workforce is, the more productive and successful a company is, right? And those two things are critical things that we as a region have to meet and we as Cortex have to meet. So I'll give you one example of what we're doing. Cybersecurity is a lane that we've decided to jump in. It's one of the things that we've added in our strategic plan, right? Why? Cybersecurity, for the third or fourth year in a row, PricewaterhouseCoopers does a survey of CEOs saying, what are your biggest pains? What are your big threats? Cybersecurity is number one. Again, it came out in January for the year after year after year, right? Cybersecurity means talent mostly, cyber talent. 4 years ago, alarm bells went off in St. Louis because the data showed there are 4,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in our region. 4,000. The data was updated. Today it's 8,000, right? This problem is getting bigger and bigger, and we have to get on top of it, right? So Cortex said, we think we can be part of the solution, because if you think about talent, there are three buckets. There's the supply side, the learners, the potential employees. There are the training enterprises, whether they be the academic institutions like UMSL and SLU and WashU and Webster, or the organizations that provide specialized training and certificates. We, for the cyber lane, decided to partner with a firm called Perscolas, which is establishing a presence here from New York, and they're partnering with local entities like NPower and CyberUp. The other end is the demand side, the employers. We launched something a year ago called the Global Center for Cybersecurity at Cortex. It's a membership organization, and by member, it's employers that have enough scale, they care about cyber, they have a cyber workforce. And we come together and we offer three things. One is a place to collaborate and talk about best practices. No one wants to compete on cyber threats, right? Two is a chance to get an early look at new technologies coming, either from the McKelvey School at Washington University with advanced research, or a startup company saying, here's a new tool to deploy. And potential members, companies say, oh, those are really good, interesting. Where they lean in and say, where do I sign up, as we say, we're going to provide a talent pipeline for you to meet your talent needs. And we're going to give you a seat at the table so that you have a say in the curriculum. And we're going to continue to work with you, the employer, and the learner that's placed for 2 years past placement to make sure that this relationship works. Because it does nobody any good to go through something and a year later it fails. It's bad for the individual and bad for the company. So we're launching that. We have our first cohort starting in May. And when we get up to scale next year, it'll be 200 to 300 people a year with cyber jobs. And 3/4 of them will be people of color. That's the track record for Perscolas, and we're working with partners for that funnel. And I'm really excited about that. That's one example.
I'm going to go back to what you were talking about NGA.
Yep.
There is, NGA, of course, is in North St. Louis, and a reasonable distance from where the Cortex is. And certainly the stuff you're talking about with cybersecurity is great. But on the NGA piece of it, it doesn't seem that the business community has much of a commitment to do anything closer to the NGA. If it does, we haven't heard about it. And it seems, and then you have the downtown, is it Downtown North, I think it's called, with McKelvey and Square and Starwood Group, they call it, and the Glow Building and you mentioned T-Rex. Is there, are you working together? Because it seems like there's that's an area, you talk about focus, I'm not quite clear what it is about doing it at the Cortex and not doing more in North City. And I'm not certainly trying to drag you to any kind of political part of it, but do you understand my question? It seems like I don't see the kind of regional approach, but maybe it's happening and I just don't know about it.
Yeah, here's what I think. First of all, Cortex campus and the NGA West campus is a couple of mile distance. It's not far. It's not right across the street, but it's not far. I believe that these early investments that will happen at Cortex, where we'll build a secure building and we'll be able to entice companies like Booz Allen Hamilton and the others that I talked about to actually move folks from other parts of the country to establish a beachhead here, will be important beachhead, and they'll develop a level of comfort. And when NGA West opens in a few years, there will be momentum, and then phase 2 will be there. We're talking to a developer. Here's a real example. A company out of Northern Virginia, they make these specialized secure buildings that we're talking about. They've built some space at the Globe building, phase 1, I think 50, 60,000 square feet. Phase 2 will be a 200,000 to 300,000 square foot building at Cortex with a secured conferencing space. And phase 3, to time it in a way that NGA West opens, will be a building near the NGA West, across the street in that proximity. So that's the long look. I think we'll see more of that, and I think the establishing this beachhead in an established, vibrant innovation and commercialization zone that has the ability, because of its live, work, play, and we're across the street from the foundry, we can attract the talent that's needed. We're working right now with developers to build additional residential in the area. Steve Smith and Foundry is building residential in the area. That is an important step that's in the next months and 18 months. That will lead, I'm sure and confident, to initial investments by companies closer even to the NGA than the couple of miles that we are.
Briefly getting back to the workforce and your potential pool, are you creating pathways with educators in terms of K through 12? Have you even broached the subject of employers maybe relaxing some of the rules that have previously governed hiring people in terms of a 4-year education? How do we negotiate that part of it?
Yes and yes. So for these cybersecurity jobs, employers are starting to understand that you don't have to have a 4-year degree in comp sci from SLU or WashU or one of the institutions. That there's specialized training from the launch codes and the NPowers and the Perscolases. And these are 12 to 15 month intensive programs. They're bespoke to meet the needs of the employers, enough of a skill set that they can then join the company and have an ascent through learning the practices there. We're working in partnership with organizations in St. Louis for the K through 12 piece. That's the pipeline for a lot of these folks. It's recent grads, unemployed, underemployed, but folks are at different places on their journeys, right? In order to enter into the cybersecurity portal, the Perscola's path, you have to have a certain amount of aptitude, right? So a recent grad from UMSL with a general degree who says, boy, I would like to career in cyber, it's great starting salary and the trajectory path forward, that you enter right in and you're ready to go in 12 to 15 weeks. There's a job waiting for you at the other end, right? If you're not at that place, then we look to partners like NPower and others to say, we need to scale up this individual. And there may be a 3-month period there, or whatever it is, to have the preparation needed to enter the Perscola's path. We work with Cyber Up for military vets. You've left the military, you've had a career, you've got great experiences, but you may need to have a little bit more training on some basic computer or math, whatever it is. NPower will do that, will work with us. So it's this continuum. But we start with talking to kids K through 12, because if we don't start there, it's too late if we're going to wait, right?
That's right.
So part of it's interesting because another program that I was involved in at the Danforth Center is a partnership with the St. Louis Community College for lab tech training program, right? Those jobs, you graduate from that, you start at $50,000 a year and you go to work in a lab and you have a lab coat. They're terrific jobs and it's a career. There is always more demand than supply. So we asked, what is stopping this? Is it public transportation? Is it, and what you find a lot is just these kids simply don't know that this path exists, right? So we now have to think about ways to make sure the word gets out to teachers, parents, administrators. And the question then is, at what point do you start to get that message? Because again, I think if you wait till their junior year in high school, it's too late. Is it 5th grade, 6th grade? So there are organizations like STEM STL that we work closely with, and a whole host of others, that's their lane. And our job is to make sure we coordinate with that, not compete or crowd that lane, and that we wait for the proper handoff in this continuum. And the end is, again, and success, and we go back to the cyber, is not somebody gets an entry-level job. We want these individuals to have a career, to be upskilled, and to compete for C-suite positions and become CISOs in the future, not just stay at entry level. So that's the other piece, is that we will, at Cortex with partners, look at career-long upskilling. Technology is changing very quickly. You need new skills. We will work with employers. What are those skills needed? And we'll help you with that upskilling.
Let's talk about Cortex a little and the we. Who initially 20 years ago, seems to me it was, at least if my memory serves correctly, really driven a lot by the academic institutions here. Today, when you talk about, without listing all your board members, and I'm sure you're quite fond of them, of course, but seriously, who are the dominant? I don't know if the word would be owners, but investors or supporters of Cortex.
So 20 years ago, 4 institutions, our anchor institutions, came and said we're going to do this,
right.
and they put in money. Washington University, St. Louis University, University of Missouri St. Louis, and BJC. Put in some additional funding, and that funding was mainly to help put the parcels of the land together, clean them up, and prepare them to be developed, and then start to tell the story of why you should be here and why you should grow a company here. And of course, those anchor institutions are still very much involved. They're on the board. But Cortex now, 20 years later, has developed a life of its own. So the we in the community is not just the anchor institutions, but the small companies that are hopefully someday going to be the next Centenes. It's the presence of the larger companies, the Microsofts and the Aons, right? They have a say and they're part of community. Also, though, it is the training organizations that I'm talking about, and we're going to have a little bit more intentionality to reach out beyond the 200 acres to the community at large. The situation where we live, whether it's south of the campus, the district, or north, and we're working with, again, we do this in partnership, right? The last thing that we want is to have a sense of arrogance that Cortex is a shiny brand and successful, and we're going to go to the north and put a flag down and say, we're here to fix you. Our mantra is, if invited, and if we can prove that we bring something are uniquely suited to fix a problem, we will explore that and join a partnership. We will not go out and just try to increase our empire.
I love that, planting the flag.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the beachhead?
Yeah.
How do we incentivize St. Louis and incentivize the move? What are you asking of the rest of the community? Because it's not only bound by your campus, correct?
Yeah. So if you get back to the premise that this is about people and talent, think about what we need to sell, right? We have to burnish the image of St. Louis as a great place and a safe place and a friendly place, right? And there's work to do there. I mean, like a lot of cities, there are some issues there, and employers ask about that. They look at the data. They ask about, is this the kind of place that 24 to 34-year-old will want to come? And I think things like the Foundry and the MLS soccer and the development of the Grove just to our south, those things really matter. When you look at Austin, Texas, and their whole Keep Austin Weird, it's the funky clubs and the bars and the scene, which ironically they're losing now with their success, kind of like San Francisco did. We've got to find those places, celebrate them, elevate them, and make them part of the offering. When you're, my oldest is 27, and he's a data analyst, and he could have 10 jobs a week, right? He's living in Vancouver and working there. If we were to try to recruit him and we were to say, we have incredible 401k match, yawn.
Yawn.
It's United Healthcare Choice Plus, yawn. It's, the things that will get him is, this is in a vibrant community, also to be part of something that is a grand cause. We're going to try to be an example of an urban turnaround that's inclusive, right? Now he's leaning in, right? There's this idea of I can be something bigger. I can work anywhere. And we're not going to, I mean, it's folly to try to out San Francisco, not Boston, Boston. We shouldn't do it. We should say, what are we uniquely suited to do? If you look at the another pipeline of talent, so we have the entry-level cybersecurity talent I'm talking about, which is there's a target-rich environment in our city, unemployed, underemployed, but there's also a cohort for different kinds of jobs we're going to need here that have a degree in comp sci or statistics or data analytics. I think rich hunting grounds are the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, Mizzou, Missouri Science and Technology, University of Wisconsin-Madison, Midwest schools that are pumping out the best and the brightest, many of whom are from the Midwest, and they aren't dying to go live in New York or Boston or San Francisco. We should be able to make a case that come here to St. Louis, and we can give you a career that's fulfilling. You can be part of something grand and big, and it's in the Midwest. So there's a Midwest sort of culture and sensibility that you're used to and want.
Okay, Sam, I'm channeling some of the 9 PBS audience that's smarter than me, and they're going to ask you a question, I'm sure at home, I think. I've heard, or make a statement, and I want your response to it. I've heard this all before. People will say that, maybe unfairly. How is it in 2022 that is different?
First of all, it's a fair thing to say, right? This is, there have been initiatives, and I can't sit here and promise this, I'm going to promise success. What I can say that I feel is different in the 27 years that my wife and our family have been here is there is a sense of collaboration and unity that I've never seen before. I think in the past there used to be this sort of scarcity mentality that if I don't get this, somebody else will, and fighting over crumbs. An example of that, when the call with the big federal funds started coming and there was a call to say, we're going to pick a handful of regions, we, the federal government, are going to pick a handful of regions that are leading in technology and put a proposal in, and you could win $100 million. In the past, 5 years ago and more, there would have been this fight for 6 different groups to say, we're going to go after this. And that's a formula for, that's an easy thing for the grant administrators to say. St. Louis is 6. There was this coming together, and the theme here was advanced manufacturing. And frankly, Cortex doesn't really get much out of that. We're not in that lane, but we said we support the initiative for the region. We think it's a strong case to make. We'll be part of it. We'll be part of shaping it. And if we get something that makes sense out of it, a little piece of it, that's great. But the region wins, that's the number one thing. It wasn't just Cortex saying that. It was BioSTL saying that. It was a whole host of others that came around the same table to say, we have to unite and win versus fight for crumbs and lose. And that didn't exist in the past. So that gives me optimism. I really do think that this investment by the federal government on NGA West is a catalytic event if we don't screw it up, right? It is in a subject that is going to only grow. Geospatial, location science, whatever you want to call all those things that are now ubiquitous in our lives. There are sensors everywhere, and so we need to do that well. It's an opportunity that is once in a lifetime, frankly.
Very important update. We want to thank Sam Fiorello, the president and CEO of the Cortex Innovation Community. We are betting on the fact that you really haven't slept much in the last 2 years, so we hope you get some sleep. We know you have a lot of miles to go, and we hope that you will have the conversation again with us here on 9 PBS.
I will. It's my pleasure, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Sam.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned to 9 PBS. Have a great weekend.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.